as somebody who works on Latin America, who has many colleagues and former students who either are from Latin America or in Latin America, I've gotten a number of condolence messages from colleagues and friends in Latin America, particularly from Brazil and from Colombia. And I found that especially interesting because they not only are commiserating with us, with me, with us, with themselves, because they know the election of a US president always has ramifications well beyond the boundaries of the United States, but also they're very much seeing this as part of a larger process, a larger trend, a larger tendency, whatever we want to call it, so that you have in Brazil the recent golpe, as many people are calling it, a judicial or legislative coup, the impeachment and removal of Dilma Rousseff from the presidency, and her replacement with Michel Temer, a much more right-wing and I would say much more corrupt figure than anybody who was associated with Dilma Rousseff. My Colombian student who wrote me heartbroken was also heartbroken about the recent vote in Colombia, which voted no on the peace agreement. And one of the ways in which the no vote won was by Uribe and his followers on the right associating a vote for peace with a vote for gay rights. And in a sort of classic attempt to connect something that will appeal sort of across social groups and classes that has nothing actually to do with the specific peace agreement. So they were looking at this kind of populist, right-wing populist trend as a much more transnational trend, not just something that is specific to the United States. And that's something of a change, because for many years things would happen in the United States and friends of mine who lived abroad would say like, oh, this is such an American thing. And so I suppose, I don't think we can actually take consolation from the fact that this is not only a North American thing now, but it is certainly something we need to be aware of. And one more thing that I got in my email today that I felt sort of brought a lot of this together was an email from Vijay Prashad, who some of you may know is, actually I don't know what Vijay's actual discipline is, but he's a sort of cultural studies scholar who has sort of moved away from, and sort of somebody who studies political economy, who has moved away from academia and become sort of a roving sort of ambassador for left-wing critiques, particularly of the situation in the Middle East and Asia. And he sent out a message today about the results of the US elections. And he taught for many years at Trinity College in Hartford, so he's lived in the US for many years. And his comment was, again, to see this very much as part of a transnational trend. And he cited a quote from Antonio Gramsci. Other people have had a similar quote, and there's some debate about where this quote really originates. But the quote is, the old world is dying, the new one is struggling to come forth. Now is the time of monsters. And so I don't know how big a monster we're talking about in the case of Donald Trump. Certainly he already has promised to do things that will cause immense hardship and misery to many people. And he is certainly not alone among the monsters. But I will say that Vijay Prashad said that he sees this as the death knell of neoliberalism. I'm not so optimistic. I think the news of neoliberalism's death is premature. But I do think that it is something that we have to think very seriously about, how as people who are critical of the right and the right's use of the unhappiness, the misery that that neoliberalism has caused, how we can respond in a way that is both critical of neoliberalism, that responds to the hurt and hardship that neoliberalism has caused, but that doesn't just make empty promises like I'm going to bring back steel mills to Michigan, which of course not only will Trump, but really no one will do. So just to talk a bit about the election, I agree that we shouldn't dwell too much on the election and why things happened exactly the way they did. There are, of course, many lessons we can derive from the election. We can derive the lesson that James Comey and the FBI, his FBI agents, are channeling the foul spirit of J. Edgar Hoover. We can, again, as Becky Getz pointed out, we can think very seriously of the damage done by voter ID laws. We could think about moving. One of the problems is that we all live in certain cities on the East and West Coast and Chicago. In the last 7 presidential elections, the Republican presidential candidate has won the popular vote exactly once. You think, how could that be? But it is true. In 2004, George W. Bush narrowly won the popular vote. That is the only time since 1988 that the Republicans have done so. So people have asked me, what do I say to my kids when they ask? One thing you can say to your kids is most Americans did not vote for Donald Trump. Even most Americans who voted didn't vote for Donald Trump. So clearly if we distributed ourselves more evenly across the United States, we could improve our chances of winning the Electoral College, but then we'd have to live in Nebraska. So, sorry, I'm sure Nebraska's a really nice place too. Okay, so there's a lot of things a lot of lessons we can derive from this election. But for me, the most sobering question, not really a lesson because I don't know the answer, but the most sobering question is what to do about the loss of a considerable portion of the population, particularly of Michigan. So it was extremely annoying to constantly hear people on TV say the working class is not voting for Hillary. And of course what they meant was the white male working class was not. And of course working class is itself a very problematic category these days. But what they always meant was the white male working class. And then they would talk about Latinos and African Americans as if they don't have a class. But nonetheless, the fact that according to at least some statistics I've seen, 50% of unionized white male workers did not vote for Hillary. Not the general populace, but unionized white male workers did not vote Democratic. Is something that I think we really have to think about seriously and what it means. Sometimes I worry that it's not a problem that has a solution, at least a politically appealing solution, because I do think that racism and sexism have so much to do with it. There was a photograph in the Times today of a group of guys sitting in a bar in Michigan watching the election results, and I had this sort of image in my mind of one of them said, I think I'm going to vote for Hillary. And the rest of them looking at him like he was crazy, the way we would if we were sitting in Lanterna and somebody said, gee, I think I'm going to vote for Trump. So, there's a kind of structure of feeling that's very hard to break, a wall that's very hard to break through. On the other hand, Bernie was very successful in Michigan, and Bernie was able to rally a great deal of support in Michigan, including among white working class men. So I don't think it's impossible to do, but I'm not sure exactly, besides, sort of having Bernie when he's in his 90s continue to run for president, but I don't think that's practical. So, but I think that this is something we have to grapple with and something we need to think about. So, thank you.